Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast from still the aforementioned Chase Thomas coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me down there in Decatur, Georgia, my good friend from the University of North Georgia alumni, the Georgia voice of college football, host as well. Matt Green is here. Matt, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, sir. It is good to be back with you this week, like we are every week. I would say the greatest week of even though we're a college football show here, greatest week of sports of the year, every year.
I have to disagree.
The first week of the NCAA tournament is not the greatest week of sports of the year. What is the greatest week of sports?
It's a good question. It would have to be in the fall at some capacity for me. The fall is just the best sports time of the year, no matter what. Like when you have the crossover of college, NFL, and NBA just starting out, like it's pretty nice. Like I really enjoy that combination all being around together. But because my three biggest loves are, I guess, college football, NBA, and the NFL, my best days of the year are like when those are all happening in the same week. So maybe I'm different. And also this tournament in particular, I think was one of the worst opening weekends in a really long time. No big upsets. I think I don't know what the score is with New Mexico right now as we're taping this late on a Sunday, but not a lot of teams moving on. Colorado State lost on a buzzer beater. There's no Cinderella in this year's group. I don't know. I mean, Tennessee obviously still cooking, and I'm excited about that to see what it looks like with Kentucky in the Sweet 16 on Friday night for a chance to move back into the Elite Eight in back-to-back years. Tennessee gone to the Sweet 16 now, 3 consecutive seasons under Rick Barnes. But I don't know. I think a lot of people. I'm a big let people enjoy and like things, Matt Green. So I'm not going to rain on people's parade who really, really love the NCAA men's tournament and love that opening weekend. But I don't know, man. Like, you know what? My favorite week of sports is like maybe opening week of college football, or not week 0 because week 0 obviously doesn't have a lot, but like a good game week where I know on the calendar, like we got some big timers and then some middle of the week games too. Like we have a great Thursday night football game, and then we have a great Saturday slate and a great Sunday slate and a good Monday night. And I'm like, all right, like this feels good.
About week 1 last year. What did we have, like 4 good games? It was like there's like a couple. Like we had Georgia Clemson was a good one.
Yeah.
Who was it? LSU? Who did LSU play? LSU USC was a good one. There was only like a handful of like ranked, because that's the thing. It's just the quantity is just, like you said, this year there weren't as many upsets as most years, but like 32 games we get of college basketball on Thursday, Friday, 16 on Saturday and Sunday. It's good stuff.
I mean, were you more excited for this than you were the first week slate of college football playoff games? Because I was way more intrigued by the first round of the college football playoff games, like that for opening week.
I mean, I'm a bigger college football fan, but even that, it's not just the overload of just nonstop action. Like you said, I think if you're going to say the best week of a college football season, personally, and maybe this is me being a 12-team playoff hater, but I think a random Saturday in October that's got like 10 ranked matchups or something like that, or 8 ranked matchups. Like maybe we don't get that many that have 10 ranked matchups, but just one of these random, we're deep into conference play. That's probably a better like week of sports than the college football playoff week.
Well, I mean, either I would take over the first week of college basketball, March Madness is what I'm saying. Like I still just get more amped for that. Like you said, like more big time weekend college football games. Obviously, like you said, it's not spread out over a couple days. I think part of it for a lot of people too, and it is that it happens during the workday. Like I just feel like that's part of it, is like no one's working on Thursday and Friday because so many people are just locked in on their brackets. It's also fun for a lot of people to fill out their brackets, and I don't like filling out brackets. I don't like I know this will blow your mind that the contrarian Chase over here is not a big bracket guy, but I don't like having a emotional attachment or any kind of like rooting interest in Colorado State, Maryland. I don't want to be like, oh, where's my bracket? I also think it's just, look, I feel like I'm dumping on all I don't want to be negative Nancy over here, but I feel like I'm dumping on what brings a lot of people joy here, and I don't want that to be the case. Let people enjoy things that they like. I am just saying personally that I don't like doing brackets. I have different tastes and stuff like that. I don't really care. I don't. I didn't watch much Colorado State Ram tape this year, so I don't really have. I don't know. I just think it's interesting to me culturally that a lot of people get so wrapped up in their bracket and like spend a lot of time thinking about it. And it's really interesting to me because like they didn't watch any of these teams play outside of their own and maybe a couple others all year long. And they ride and die with their bracket. And they're just like, oh, what are you at? And I just think it's interesting that it's this thing that is unique to college basketball. But I don't know. It's just not me.
Yeah, the bracket doesn't get me excited like it once did when I was like a little kid or whatever. But it's tradition. You just have to fill out a bracket. Like you just.
Do you know what I do miss though? I miss
that?
doing my brother, my dad, and I used to do the back when bowl games mattered. Bowl season, like doing that with like printing out the bowl season games in early December and us all doing a bracket challenge or a bowl challenge amongst the family was very enjoyable. I enjoyed that a lot more than the bracket
bowl challenge over a bracket challenge.
Yeah, because I also just watch a lot more national college football. Like I think part of it is that I have a lot better feel for these college football teams than I do for the majority of these college basketball teams. You know what I mean? Like I've seen a lot of the teams I'm picking in these bowl games. Like I've watched a lot of tape and I've watched a lot of
You're saying
games.
you can't just learn everything about a team by just clicking on the little info button
Yeah,
on your
it's
bracket,
just not the same.
a short little blurb and knowing what their record was and what their mascot is.
Yeah, it's not the same.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Bowl season definitely used to be more intriguing before we had all the opt-outs. But no, just that first weekend, it's maybe it's the novelty, like you said, of the weekday and everything, but also the novelty of just so many games. And typically so many of them come down to the wire and no one ever knows what's going to happen. So unlike the Georgia Bulldogs, most of the games were competitive. So it was up there with Mike Fultonavich. Game 5 of the NLDS is honestly how it felt. It was because you're sitting there like, what was it, 15-0, I want to say. And it's like, it's just 15 points. It's like, that's college basketball. It's a game of runs, it feels bad when it starts this way. But we're only down, it was like 15-3. You're only down 12. Like, okay, let's start to get things going. And then what was it, 30-5, 35? I know it was 27-3 at one point. You're like, okay, it's possible to lose a game in the first 5-6 minutes if you don't do anything. And then I think you saw a stat that was like Georgia outscored Gonzaga for like the last like 32 minutes of the game or something like that. And it's like, cool. The first 8, you're down 30 or something. So unfortunate. I almost didn't take Georgia in my bracket because Gonzaga just felt like the worst type of team to get. That's just the seasoned program. Mark Few's been there like 30 years. But, they did get to the tournament, so they were just happy to be there. Maybe next year they can make some noise.
I think the Diamond Dogs swept Florida this weekend after Tennessee just swept Florida last week, right?
That is true. Hitting a bunch of bombs. I did see that.
Florida 0-6 in SEC play to start off.
Oh wow.
The SEC college baseball is just it's brutal, man. I saw a stat. I don't know where it went. Mississippi State, who won the college baseball national championship 3 years ago now, right? What is this, 2025? Yeah. 3 years ago, because they won it, then Mississippi State or Ole Miss won it, then LSU won it, then Tennessee won it. But since that Mississippi State title, it's been bad, like below 500. Like it's just been a gradual, sad decline. And they have that gigantic field, the dude over there in Starkville. So I don't know. Mississippi State just declining. I don't know, college baseball. And LSU and Tennessee, the two juggernauts. Tennessee taking 2 of 3 in Tuscaloosa this weekend over the Tide. But yeah, man. And Tennessee, like I said, men's hoops still out here in the Sweet 16, and we'll see if they're able to beat Kentucky, who Kentucky swept.
Yes,
Tennessee.
They are, sir. The Vols are still alive.
Can you explain yourself? Because Matt, I don't know what to do with this, because Matt has done something that I would never do. And I can just say with a clean conscience, there is not one part of me that would ever pick the Georgia Bulldogs to win a national championship. Put my hard-earned money towards the Georgia Bulldogs winning a national championship. And Matt Green, Is that not what you did in regard to the Tennessee Volunteers this weekend?
Yes. So me and my buddy, the first Thursday of the tournament every year, we make the trek up to the casino in North Carolina, and just have a little fun, play some bets, and maybe throw in some futures, see what happens. And I just had this brilliant idea. The number one team, and I would recommend everyone out there do this. The number one team I'm rooting against, I would say, in this NCAA tournament is definitely the Tennessee Vols. The one team that I don't want to make the Final Four, much less win the national championship, is the Tennessee Volunteers. So now your boy has a $10 bet that the Tennessee Volunteers win the whole thing. So I can't lose. So as soon as Tennessee's out, I'm ecstatic. And then if they never do, your boy's gonna win a couple $100. So that's what you call hedging your emotions. You've heard of hedging your bets. That's how you hedge your emotions. So I might take this tactic into college football season, and start to bet on the teams that I'm rooting the most against during football season as well.
Nasty work by you. Just nasty.
It's a win-win, sir. Oh, also to answer your other question, Michigan State did just beat New Mexico by 8. So, yeah, any double digits seeds. St. John's lost last night. Is Arkansas, were they a 7 or
They're
a 10? Arkansas might be they might be the lowest one left. So not a lot of Cinderellas, which
noted Cinderella with the Tyson-backed Arkansas basketball team led by John Calipari. America's favorite Cinderella, the Arkansas Razorbacks.
Yeah, and the Sam Walton money. No, I hear you. But there is an aspect to like the Cinderellas kind of ruining the tournament at times when they get too far, and it's like, you play the games you play. So if you're Florida Gulf Coast, you don't have to apologize to anyone for going to the Sweet 16 or Elite 8 or however far they went that year. But when you get like a lot of these teams that were truly the best teams in the country for the first, 4 months of the season, however long the season is, you might get a better Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four product if you're actually getting, the true best teams in the country and not just the Cinderellas that got hot at the right time.
I think that's fair. I think what you want is the first two rounds to have some good upsets, and then the Blue Bloods and just the best teams in the country make it into the Sweet 16, Elite 8, and Final Four. I do think what does stink is the amount of SEC teams here in the final. Like, we're going to have some rematches, obviously Tennessee, Kentucky, Part 3 here on Friday, but with Ole Miss winning, with Arkansas advancing, A&M almost got there.
So who else left? We got Florida, Tennessee, Alabama, Auburn, Arkansas,
Ole Miss,
Mississippi State.
No, they lost in the first round.
That was Ole Miss. That was playing Iowa State just now.
Who am I forgetting?
So at least 6 that are still alive right now.
Is there anyone else we're missing?
Vanderbilt lost. Georgia lost. Oklahoma lost.
Did you say Kentucky?
Oh, Kentucky's still alive. Yeah. That's 7.
Yeah, so I think it's 7.
Pretty strong.
It's a lot. Like almost half the Sweet 16 is SEC teams.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, Matt Green, let's transition to our Vols and Dogs section here on the program before we get into our top 25 coaches revisited list here in 2025, and we'll look at what's changed from 24 to 25, and that'll be the theme here on tonight's show. But before we get into that, we did which home game we were both most excited about, most curious about for Georgia and Tennessee in the 2025 schedule ranks. Now, let's look at which away game are you most intrigued and excited about, Matt Green? So first up, your Georgia Bulldogs. Which away game in 2025 are you most intrigued by?
Well, it's not a very long list. It's this was a hard question to answer back in 2024. But Georgia going into 2025 has 3 road games the entire season. So all of a sudden, Mississippi State is just an every year team that on Georgia's schedule. I think they've played Mississippi State 22, 23, 24, and 25 now. Or wait, that's what I say. 23, 24, and 25, and 2020 was the first one I meant. I think they rocked the black jerseys, I think, against Mississippi State in 2020, the dog collar ones. So all of a sudden, Georgia plays Mississippi State all the time. Still can't play A&M, but we'll get to that later.
Look, at least they're making progress. They're playing the Maroon team every year, so there baby steps.
But so it's just Auburn and Tennessee, and Kirby Smart has never lost at Tennessee. He only lost at Auburn 2017, year 2. So those are 2 places that Kirby Smart has had a lot of success. But I think there's a case to be made that the Tennessee game is like the most, I don't know, I want to say most difficult. It's not necessarily most important either, but it's such a tone setter for the season because just kind of narrative wise too, that's still a team that's improved a bunch in the last 4 or 5 years, but they still haven't done enough to beat Georgia. So as long as you can still kind of, keep Tennessee, underneath your thumb, so to speak, like it's like Georgia's floor is only so low if they beat Tennessee there in week 3. But yeah, I mean, Auburn should definitely be an improved team, but it feels like Tennessee, if you're circling one game on Georgia's schedule, that's like the most likely loss, simply because going on the road is harder than playing at home. Tennessee would have to be the one.
It's interesting. We talked about it from my vantage point on the Tennessee side of things last week, right? Where I went back and forth between Georgia and Oklahoma being the biggest home game for Tennessee. I would say based on history, the answer has to be Auburn for the Dogs, because 2 years ago, Auburn, a much worse team than and much less talented than what they're going to have here in 2025 with Hugh Freeze. Peyton Thorne had a big time game against the Dogs. Brock Bowers had to go Superman for Georgia to steal that game late. Like, that game was in doubt for a lot of it, and that was obviously not the case when Auburn was in Athens last year or in years past. Like, Georgia's really handled the Tigers when they've come to Sanford Stadium, but 2 years ago raised an eyebrow where you're like, oh, it's just a little bit different on the Plains, and Auburn had a real shot to upset Kirby and the Dogs 2 years ago. To me, they at least shown in the second half that they can hang with Georgia, and that they were giving Georgia real problems, even with a below average roster at that point and an early on tenure for Hugh Freeze, with it being such a desperation year for Hugh Freeze and company, where I think he's going to have to win 8 or 9 games to probably keep his job, would be my guess, at Auburn. And with how much investment there has been, they bring in Jackson Arnold. They have just a litany of talented playmakers. They're good. Like, they're going to be, if they're not in the blue chip ratio this year, they're going to be right around it. I look at both games as like a big litmus test games for Auburn and Tennessee as programs against the Dogs. But I think it's fair to look at this game without my orange tinted glasses and say, like, Auburn at least proved that they can go 4 quarters with Kirby to this point. Like, Tennessee has been shut out in the second half the last 2 times they've played Georgia. Now, did they make their best effort last year in Athens? Yes. I think that was the best Tennessee's played Georgia to this point in the Heupel Kirby era. But it still wasn't enough. It's still, they've got a ways to go to really realistically have a shot at beating Georgia over the course of 4 quarters. I don't know. I just look at Auburn. To me, I would go Auburn, Matt Green, because I think that's right now a more losable game until Tennessee proves it.
That's interesting. They've definitely been closer going at Auburn as opposed to going at Tennessee. So from that perspective, I understand. I just still, right now, today on March, whatever it is, 20, folks are listening on March 24th, of course, on Monday. I would have to say Tennessee is a better team than Auburn in 2025. Yeah. That's my assumption. So I think just because I think they're going to be a better team, I have to put Tennessee. But yeah, I mean, Jordan-Hare Stadium, weird things happen in Jordan-Hare. And that's after Georgia's already played a couple of tough games, probably a couple top 10 opponents under their belt at that point. So Auburn kind of sandwiches in amongst that tough schedule. So from that perspective, I feel like Auburn's more of a can't lose game than Tennessee. Tennessee feels like first SEC game of the year. Gunnar Stockton's first SEC start of his career, most likely Gunnar Stockton. Whoever it is, it's their first SEC start of their career. So in Neyland Stadium, I think that would be a more understandable loss than, you get into week 6, playing Auburn. If you just told me we do lose to Auburn week 6, then I'm wondering, is that Georgia's second loss of the year? Is that Georgia's third loss of the year? It might be more of a can't lose, depending on what happens with Tennessee and Alabama in September.
That's fair. I mean, it's interesting when you go through the history of Georgia-Bama. So Georgia's won the series every, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 straight. And they're the all-time
both Auburn
lead now.
And Tennessee 8 straight, right?
Oh, well, there you go. But Georgia only leads the series 65-56, and 8, so 8 ties. So Georgia really turned this from being a 50-50 rivalry to some slight Georgia dominance with their most recent run here with Kirby. But the last 3 times Auburn has beat Georgia have been in Alabama, at Auburn. 2010, 2013, and 2017 were the last 3 times that Auburn beat Georgia. And the last time Auburn beat Georgia was that Jarrett Stidham year, where they crushed Georgia and then beat Alabama, and then they were gifted Georgia again in the SEC title game, and Kerryon Johnson was beat up, and it just did not go well, and Auburn lost, and it was an all-time what-if year. And that's kind of forgotten in the Gus Malzahn era.
Kerryon Johnson got hurt against Alabama, so he was like not 100% in that game, but yeah.
But it's like one of those games where that season, like, because it just feels like forever ago, and not to relitigate the Gus Malzahn era on the Plains, but it's like people just, it was 2014, it was a Nick Marshall year or whatever, and then I don't think people remember like that 2017 year at all. Like, his team was really, really good. Like, that was a team that could have won the national title. So I think there is this idea that like it never got better, or he never came close to winning a national title again. At Auburn, it was like, no, he's really close in 2017. He beat Georgia and Alabama back to back, and that was a really good team with Stidham and Kerryon and company. And I don't know, that's a big what if.
Yeah, and also like when you look at this 2024 playoff, there's just kind of this new, I don't know, precedent, if that's the right word, or just new idea that you can't be punished for the conference championship game. Like, that was never a thing in the 4-team playoff. Like, Auburn sure as hell got punished in the 4-team playoff. Like, an Alabama team that they beat went ahead of them because Auburn played in the SEC championship. It was not exactly just a result there for an Auburn team that did really. And I think one of their losses that year was to Clemson, who was the number 1 seed in the playoff that year. So it was a ridiculous schedule, but yeah, it's I think back when it was like 04, 05 or something, it was like tied at one point, and like the points scored all time were also tied. But now, what'd you say the record was now? Auburn, Georgia?
65, 56, and 8.
Yeah, Mark Richt deserves a lot of credit too for I think he was like 10-5 or something against Auburn. Like, he had a lot of success, and Kirby's just kept that going and dominated Auburn.
Yeah, it's interesting because the last 2 times, I mean, obviously that 2017 game was wild, 40-17 Tigers, but 2013, obviously, the miracle at Jordan-Hare, the first one, in the with how that game went in 2010. Wait, 2010 or 2013?
2010 was Cam Newton. Yeah, 2013 was.
That's what I was like, dating myself a little bit. I was like, I thought it was 2013. I was second guessing it for a second. I was like, it's 2013 because we're getting older, and I'm counting up the years here. I'm like, hold on, is that right? But those were great. Like, those were interesting. But what the key of those years were, Auburn was really good. Auburn was a contender. So it seems like for Auburn to beat Kirby this year, if like history's any indicator, if the Tigers beat the Dogs in the Plains, Tigers might be a playoff team this year. Like, that might mean that things have all come together. Jackson Arnold's a hit, and Hugh Freeze is looking at a double-digit win season. To me, that will be interesting because that seems like the launching point for the Tigers. If they beat Georgia at home, that probably means they're for real, and Hugh Freeze is going to have a special season, a special team would be my guess.
No, that's definitely possible. I think that's the crazy part when you look at Georgia's schedule is how tough it is, and it's probably the toughest schedule in college football, like assuming Florida and Auburn aren't good. And if Florida and Auburn, if either of them are good, and both of those teams could be breakthrough teams in 2025, the schedule just gets that more insane. But yeah, I think the last time Georgia went to Auburn when they were actually good would have probably been 2019, Bo Nix freshman year. And it was like 21-0 fourth quarter, and Auburn ended up coming back. I think I want to say 21-14 was the final score. Georgia needed to stop late, but so definitely, regardless of how good Georgia is, going into Jordan-Hare is never easy.
And we should also say, Auburn has a bye before Georgia. So they play at A&M, and then they get a bye before Georgia comes to town. So they get 2 weeks to get healthy and get right for the Dogs. And if they beat Georgia, their schedule after that, Mizzou at home, at Arkansas, Kentucky at home, at Vanderbilt, Mercer at home, Alabama at home. Like, that's a launching point for them where they might be favored in a lot of these, if not all, except for Alabama potentially after that. So if they can survive, because the early part of their schedule is tough, like at Oklahoma, at Baylor to kick off the year, at A&M. But if they beat Georgia at home, that launches them in that second half where Hugh Freeze can like go on a run there. And I don't know how many losses they'll have at that point, but Auburn getting Georgia in that middle part of the year where the back half of their schedule is pretty nice, that could make things very interesting for the Tigers down the stretch.
Yeah, that's true. They should be. I mean, yeah, and especially if they beat Georgia, I'm sure they'd probably be favored against Missouri the following week. Yep. But yeah, if they beat Georgia, they're probably favored in every game the rest of the way before Alabama.
And then Bama at home. That's when they've had better luck. Traditionally, he's getting Bama at home. So who knows there? On the flippity flop here, Matt Green, in Neyland Stadium, we talked about last week for the Vols on the road. Like you said, you didn't have many choices because Georgia only has 3 true road games here in 2025. Tennessee has several different intriguing options, and I've gone back and forth on this because I think it's interesting to gauge fellow Vol fans' mood and temperament on these two games, because there are some Vol fans who will write off Florida, where it's like, it's in Gainesville, I don't care if it's in late November, early September, it's a house of horrors, like I got to see it to believe it that we can win in Gainesville. There are others who look at Alabama and Tuscaloosa where like, we kind of own Tuscaloosa of late. Like there's not a lot of, you're not really scared of Alabama anymore. You've beaten them 2 of the last 4 times.
Tuscaloosa? What is this? What do you mean own Tuscaloosa?
I mean, I'm saying Tennessee baseball just won the series. Tennessee basketball
that doesn't
swept.
Apply to football.
Well, I'm just saying football, they just beat them. They beat them 2 of the last 3 years. They were right there. They were like the Joe Milton year. They were almost up 3 touchdowns going into the half on the road in Tuscaloosa. Like that game, they were kicking tail there in the first half against the Tide in 23. And if a couple of those red zone trips don't result in field goals and their touchdowns, Tennessee probably wins that game because Alabama doesn't have that same kind of juice coming out for the second half where they're only down 2 scores and they immediately go down the field and score quickly and it unravels from there. But my point is, Tennessee's played at Tuscaloosa well both years in the Heupel era. Like that was a game going into the fourth quarter in 2021, Matt Green. So you've beaten them both times here. Kalen DeBoer, we'll see what it looks like. I mean, is Ty Simpson going to be that? Does Ty Simpson scare you? Does a true freshman Keelan Russell scare you in Tuscaloosa? Like, I don't know. Like, I think Alabama is a huge wild card right now. S&P Plus, I think, likes them. I think they're number 2 in Bill Connolly's S&P Plus projections here in 2025. But I don't know. Like, I don't think Alabama is the same kind of, like, Tuscaloosa's not, like, this is going to tick off some Tuscaloosa fans, or Alabama fans, but you and I agree on this. Like, Tuscaloosa is not one of the top 5 scariest most intimidating places to play in the SEC. Like, Gainesville and the Swamp is far more difficult. Playing at Samford is more difficult. Like the Death Valley, obviously. Like when you go up and down the list of more intimidating atmospheres, Alabama is just not there. So I think there's cases to be made on both sides where I can understand.
It's not an easy place to play, though.
It's not easy. I shouldn't say that, but it's not intimidating. No one's ever been like, oh, it's a hornet's nest going into Bryant-Denny. Like it's just not that, man.
I mean, it's usually because of the talent on the field more than like just the true stadium noise. But
I mean, think about it. Even in Alabama, it's not even the number one environment in your own state. It's the play.
I think
Jordan Hare's better.
That's because Auburn's like a top 5 environment probably in the whole sport, though. I think what they have like 100,000 now, right? I think they upgraded.
I mean, Texas A&M. Are you taking Texas A&M or the 12th man? Or you take Kyle Field? Or are you taking Bryant-Denny?
But I'm saying Bryant-Denny is what? If you're ranking the toughest places to play, it's at worst.
It's in the back half of the SEC.
It's at worst like 15th, if not like 10th. Like
no. Do the SEC. Do the SEC right now. Like I'm telling you, like when you put it on paper, you're like, okay, they're probably somewhere in the middle.
But it's just the places that are tougher are the toughest place in the whole sport to play, though. So it's not like Alabama is. People aren't worried about going and playing at Alabama. Like that place gets going. And honestly, I wonder if the more years removed from national championships, maybe they start to get a little rowdier. Maybe they start to get a little hungrier in Tuscaloosa. Like that kind of wine and cheese crowd that's just waiting until the national championship. Like that's not the case in Alabama anymore. So, maybe things are different now that they're a regular program again and not just the powerhouse of all powerhouses. But it's still going to be a very tough place to play and a place that Josh Heupel still hasn't won either.
That's the most interesting part, right? Is that Josh Heupel has not won at Tuscaloosa yet, and he has not won in Gainesville yet. If I had to say which one I'm most curious about, it's Gainesville in late November, because you haven't played them this late in 25 years. And you won that last time you went down to Florida at that late in the season because of 9/11 and scheduling things, and it got moved. So you played it late in the year. I think Florida getting them late, like there's been some weird stuff with DJ Lagway this spring. You and I have talked about it, and it's just kind of strange what's going on with DJ Lagway. He's 6-1 as a starter, which is good. He played Georgia well, obviously, in that one loss. He didn't finish that game, so who knows how that game ultimately goes. But DJ Lagway was good for Florida. He was a revelation. He's the big reason Billy Napier is back, that Florida has been kind of regalvanized this offseason, both in the portal and in recruiting. That being said, the schedule is still the schedule. So like you can stockpile some talent. Like it wasn't like this was a dearth of talent. It just wasn't traditional Florida talent. And they're loaded in a lot of key spots. That's all fair. But Tennessee is going to get Florida potentially. My gut is that's going to be a CFP decider for the Vols. Like Tennessee is going to go down to Gainesville in late November, where if they win, they're in the CFP. If they lose, they're out. That's my gut, is they'll have 2 losses. And if they beat Florida on the road, then they'll be in the college football playoff in back-to-back seasons. Before the Vols come to town, the Gators go to Ole Miss, go to Kentucky, play the Georgia Bulldogs and the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, Matt Green. That's a brutal. There's no buys. Like they're going to play in a spot where Florida has just weirdly struggled against Kentucky in recent years. That's not a guaranteed win in Lexington anymore. Georgia, you won't be favored, and that looks like a loss traditionally. At Ole Miss, we still people are expecting a slight drop off, but I mean, do we think Lane Kiffin's losing to the Gators in back-to-back years? I don't know. I think getting them back at home will be pretty nice for Kiffin. They could be riding a 3-game losing streak when the Vols come to town. Like, I think this optimism with Florida, I understand, because DJ Lagway could be special and a Heisman type guy, and that just naturally elevates everything and the program around him. That being said, if there's when I look at this, there's a path to Florida being in disarray down the stretch, and Tennessee getting Florida late is a lot better than getting them early when they have all this optimism and all this hope that, man, we're back on the right track. We're playing really good football. We're 2-0, 3-0, whatever, going, getting the Gators or getting the Vols in Gainesville. I think this year in particular, it's great that Tennessee gets them. So for me, I think it's Florida, where I think a lot of fans would pick that as the least likely win of Georgia at home, Alabama on the road, or Florida on the road. I would actually say Florida on the road, to me, would be the most likely Tennessee win of that group, because we'll see what Lagway's health's like. We'll see how much they're reeling at that point in time. And I think it will be nice. This is Heupel has done a really good job over the last couple of years, just instilling like this confidence. Like what happened at South Carolina in 2022, I just don't think it's going to happen again. So if Tennessee's in that similar spot where they go to Gainesville and they know a CFP appearance is on the line, they're going to be locked in, man. Like they're going to be all systems go. This is a mature bunch. Heupel has played in a lot of road SEC games to this point. I think they'll take care of business. Maybe maybe I'm too confident in that, but I just think Florida will not be in a good place by that point in the year. And I think Tennessee will see that this gets them back in the college football playoff. I think they'll take care of business in Gainesville. Like that's my gut. I know that's might be different than a lot of Vol fans, or maybe you think too, but I don't know. I think it's Florida for me.
I could definitely see that. And Tennessee's last win in Gainesville was 2003. But man, just look at Florida's schedule. Like game 3, 4, 5, 6 is at LSU, at Miami, Texas, and at A&M. Like that's freaking brutal right there. And then they get Mississippi State before the bye week, and then like you said, Georgia, at Kentucky, who they've struggled with at times, and at Ole Miss before Tennessee. That is just a ridiculous schedule. Miami is probably going to be the best team in the ACC this year. LSU is it's going to be a very tough place to play in Death Valley week 3. The season also hasn't gone bad yet, so it's still going to be rowdy. One of their first SEC games of the year. But yeah, I think I'm basically thinking the same way you are, is that Florida game is the biggest home game because of the implication, and the implication being most likely most Tennessee fans circle those 3 games. Georgia, not that they have a 3-game schedule or anything, but Georgia, Alabama, and Florida. And so if you do lose those first 2 to Georgia and Alabama, then that Florida game is the one that you need to get to the college football playoff. But, maybe you split Georgia and Alabama, and that Florida game is the game you need to clinch an SEC title berth. So I think just for however Tennessee's season is most likely to go, that Florida win, it feels like, is going to decide something, and like at that point in the season. So I think I'm with you that like it feels like if they lose to Alabama, like that's a mulligan that they're not necessarily they're most likely not going to be favored in that game. Whereas losing to Florida, all your goals that you set for 2025 may end, like if you lose to Florida.
And that's my thing, is just I just think it's really hard for me to see a scenario where Tennessee, Florida is not a CFP appearance on the line for the Vols. I just think it's really hard to see a scenario where that's not the case. With Tennessee's just got a great schedule, and I just think it's a lot of pressure on the Vols and Heupel to go down to Gainesville and get that first dub, but I don't know. I'm oddly confident, I guess, in that game here in late November. I love where it falls in the schedule this year.
Yeah, I would too. I think Florida's, who knows what could be happening with Florida by week 11. Like
Billy Napier might be fired by then.
Yeah, honestly, with how that schedule is just so brutal, maybe there's a little understanding with what he's building and what this schedule truly is, and the schedule is definitely going to get easier in 2026. We don't know exactly what it's going to be, but it's going to be easier. It just has to be. So maybe they hold on to him for that reason, but it's definitely going to be brutal, even though they should be an improved team next year.
For sure. All right, Matt Crane, are you ready to dive into our 2025 college football top 25 head coaching rankings and lay it all out for us and what you compiled here from last year to this year?
Yes, sir. So, do we just want to read off our top 10? You gonna put a graphic on the screen or anything, or are we just gonna wing it? Just read our list.
I'll add the graphic in post production here. I'll add it in post production.
So let's see. So we just want to go by top 5, or we start at 25.
Well, before we dive into it, do a quick overview on what you found looking at your list from 25 to 24 and my list from 25 to 24. What stood out to you when you were compiling and contrasting and comparing here?
Okay, so the first thing that stands out on my list is the guys who dropped off. So I have 3 guys from 2024 that dropped off my list. You actually have 11 guys that dropped off of your 2025 list. So, really curious what Chris Kleiman did to you to go from 8 all the way out of the top 25. Wasn't a great year for Kansas State, but I still have Kleiman in there on my list somewhere. You had Mike Norvell at 4 in 2024. I had Mike Norvell at 10. Both of us have him off the list. I had Mark Stoops at 17. You also had Mark Stoops at 17. He's off of both of our lists. I don't think you had Jamie Chadwell on your list. I had Jamie Chadwell coming at 23 last year. Now I didn't crack the top 25. So let me see. The rest of yours that dropped off, you had Sonny Dykes at 15, Mike Gundy, Dave Clawson, Jonathan Smith, Troy Calhoun, Gus Malzahn, Hugh Freeze, and Pat Narduzzi. That was basically your bottom, that's almost, I think that is 15 through 25. I think you only had 1 or 2 guys that stayed on the list from last season.
Mike Norvell was in the mix for the Alabama job. And now Mike Norvell, if he doesn't go to a bowl game this year, might be out at Florida State.
Yeah, I can't explain. It's hilarious that they literally built a statue about going 13-0 when they played 14 games that year. But to go from 13-1 to 2-10, it's like we've seen, the Gene Chiswick's, the national championship followed by a 6-6 or whatever they did at Auburn, or even an Ed Orgeron from 2019 to 2020. But we've never seen a 2-10 the year after legitimately having a beef for not making a 14 playoff, and so it's just,
and winning a national title. It would not have been if a healthy Jordan Travis and you're all in, Florida State could have won a national title last year.
Absolutely, with Jordan Travis. And I mean, we can't even definitively say they couldn't have done it without Jordan Travis. Michigan was doing it with kind of mediocre quarterback play in the college football playoffs. So who's really to say? Alabama, Jalen Milroe wasn't given great quarterback play in the playoff either. So it's just unprecedented. I feel like a drop from one year to the next.
And you can't, he just can't be in the top 25. 2-10 is just insane. That's something that you would expect at the G5 level, where you have a great run and then all your roster gets pillaged and you're just all right, well, I kind of I did too well and now my roster's all gone. I have this turnover and everything doesn't go right in the following year or whatever. I mean, when you go as transfer, because the thing is, Kiffin has a similar strategy to what Norvell has done at Florida State. They're both very portal heavy. Kiffin plays in the more difficult conference. There's way less of a margin for error for Kiffin's strategy in the SEC than what Norvell is facing in a much weaker conference in the ACC, especially at the bottom half. You're losing to Memphis at home. These games were horrible. This was different for Florida State. So I just can't. Mike Norvell cannot be in my top 25. He could jump back in this year, depending on what kind of year he has. But I'm not getting all amped up for Thomas Castellanos, who was benched in the middle of the year at BC, and Gus Malzahn, we'll see how he does at OC, but I don't know. I just can't, to your point, it's unprecedented, the vibe shift in Tallahassee and how I feel about the Florida State Seminoles from one year to the next, because it felt like Florida State was back, and now it's felt like they could not be further from back, and it's just you're begging for a bowl game this year. You're just hoping to get back to just mediocrity, which is just crazy town to me.
Yeah, honestly, it's really insane what's going on at Florida State. But you want to start it at 20 to 25? We count down, or are we starting at one counting up? How you want to do it?
Let's do 25 down. Let's do that.
Okay, so so my 20. Let's see, 21 to 25. I got Dave Doran, Jonathan Smith, Matt Rule, Mario Cristobal, Sonny Dykes. You have 21 and 25, Eli Drinkowitz, Jeff Brom, Lincoln Riley, Spencer Danielson and PJ Fleck. So Drinkowitz, Danielson, and Fleck were all not ranked on your list a year ago. Whereas Jeff Brom dropped 15 spots and Lincoln Riley dropped 9 spots. So what's the deal with Brom and then I have Sonny Dykes dropping 10 spots and Doran dropping 7 spots. So what's the deal with Lincoln Riley and Jeff Brom dropping that low?
Well, I think Lincoln Riley's pretty self-evident, right? Like last year did not go well. It should have been better last year. I think they're still moving in the right direction. I still like that Lincoln's made some adjustments here, but it's not good enough. Like it's just, there's a drop off there. And at a certain point, you're like, all right, well, Miller Moss is now, funny enough, you mentioned Brom and Lincoln. It's like, well, Lincoln's quarterback is now going to be the QB1 for the Cardinals with Jeff Brom with Miller Moss. But I just thought with Tyler Shook, who was a pretty good player, he might be the third quarterback taken here in the NFL draft. They went 9-4 this past year. I just thought the ACC with Florida State falling off a cliff, Clemson having multiple regular season losses, Miami being a little unstable even at the top. I thought Louisville had a lot of opportunity to kind of take advantage at the top of the ACC. They were in the ACC title game the previous year against Florida State. And they didn't have the fall off that Florida State had, obviously, but they took a step back. So I just moved back a little bit. I'm just I think it would not be surprising if Jeff Brom is back in my top 15 after this list. I think Lincoln Riley can still get back in there, but I think he has to be in the 20s right now. I think it's just back-to-back seasons of just kind of like, you got to get back into that 10-win range, and Caleb Williams is not walking through that door right now. So I don't know what they're going to do in that regard. And I added Spencer Danielson because he had a special season at Boise State. He was good 2 years ago when he took over. I think that I have a special soft spot for these G5 coaches and like how hard it is to keep this thing humming sustainably at that level. I think John Summerall has an opportunity to jump into this conversation this year. He was close this past year, but I mean, he's 15-3 at Boise State. And I understand the Mountain West, it's not the same competition and all that kind of stuff, but he finished 3-1 as the head coach in 23 for Boise, and then he goes 12-2, 8-0. I mean, he was given James Franklin and Penn State fits. Like they could have beaten Penn State in that game. They were giving them real problems. So I just feel like he has to be in the top 25. I think Spencer Danielson has done a great job at Boise and super likable dude, and I just think he has to be in there. And then PJ Fleck is in my list now because he's kind of operating now in that Kirk Ferentz zone where he's 3 of the last 4 years, Matt Green, he's won at least 8 games. 9 games in 21, 9 games in 22, 11 games in 2019, 8 games last year. He's 56-39 all time now at Minnesota, but that's a tough job at Minnesota. And with as bloated as the Big Ten's getting, I don't know. I just think he's somewhere in that top 25. Like I think he's just really solid. And a guy who's won at Western Michigan, won at Minnesota now for an extended period of time. What's his lifetime record? Yeah, he's 86-61 career as a head coach, and that's kind of jaded by that 1-11 season his first year at Western Michigan, because those 3 years after 8-5, 8-5, 13-1. So I don't know. I think PJ Fleck is he's quietly like they're not gonna win a national title with Fleck at Minnesota, but I do think he's done a really solid job, and it's kind of getting overlooked a little bit that he's kind of like the Lane Kiffin, I think, of the Big Ten to me, where he's not for everybody, his strong personality type, but he's at a place where they don't win national championships. It's a really hard job that a lot of guys don't traditionally win well at, and he's made them into a consistent good team. Like they don't really have fall off years. So I think he belongs in that top 25 conversation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It feels like he was like the hot next coach there for a little bit, and now people have kind of forgotten about him because Minnesota is just not really competing for any sort of championships or anything like that. But he still is definitely a good coach. I can't really argue with that. I feel like Sonny Dykes is still just barely holding on for me. That national championship appearance is doing a lot of the heavy lifting there, but he's down to 25. I think he was probably top 10 after the 2022 season. But yeah, I'm with you. I'll hold off on Rule and Cristobal because you have them later. But yeah, I have Lincoln Riley at 20. So just in the next group before this. So I'm kind of with you on Lincoln Riley dropping down, but I don't think there's 22 head coaches I'm taking over Lincoln Riley. Like, he's got his weaknesses, but at the same time, I think he's got a track record. Like, he may have taken over a good program in Oklahoma and everything, but I mean, this team was an upset away from maybe getting in the 14 playoff with Caleb Williams back in, 2022? If I'm remembering that right. So, I think Lincoln Riley is still, his stock is definitely down. He's 9 spots. I have him down to 20, but yeah, I can definitely understand you dropping him there. Jonathan Smith, I liked him at Oregon State. I'm just not going to overreact to year one at Michigan State. So he's kind of in a similar spot where I had him last year. And Dave Doran, he's probably one of those that could probably drop out after next season, depending on what happens. So yeah, I don't hate any of those that you had in your group that I didn't have in mind. You know, 16 to 20?
Let's do 16 to 20. Yeah.
Okay. 16 to 20. I got Jeff Brom, Brett Bielema, Luke Fickell, Eli Drinkowitz, and like I said, Lincoln Riley. You have Kirk Ferentz, Brett Bielema, Matt Campbell, Matt Rule, and Kurt Signetti. So a few that I don't have on my list on here is so we're similar on Rule. I had Rule at 23. You had him a little bit higher. We actually have Bielema at the exact same spot. Luke Fickell didn't make your list at all, and I think I had him. So he dropped 12 spots. So I had him at number 6 going into last year. Really impressed with what he did at Cincinnati for multiple years. And I don't want to overreact to the 2 years at Wisconsin, but this just 2. This is going to be year 3, right? Are you sure? I thought we looked that up last week. He
No, it's 3.
The bowl game.
No, the bowl game was like 4. Like the bowl game, what? Yeah.
You sure about this?
I'm sure. This is going into year 4 for Luke Fickell.
Okay, so Fickell, yeah, he just hasn't done anything at Wisconsin. This is the biggest job he's ever had. So he's kind of slowly fallen down my list, or maybe quickly.
Oh, this is year 3. I got it confused. Yeah, that was the one game that he did.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
That's right.
So this being year 3. There's a lot of pressure. We talked about them last week.
We've gone back and forth on this, by the way. Snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, nap on the Luke Fickell thing because it looks confusing with the 1-0, and I yeah, my bad.
Yeah,
my
yeah,
apologies.
for sure. But yeah, dropping 12 spots, it's a pretty big drop. So he's got to do something this year, and like we talked about last week, this is going to be a really difficult year for Wisconsin to do anything with that schedule.
I mean, brutal schedule for Luke Fickell, and it's also like, man, he burned a lot of goodwill by doing the Phil Longo thing. He's now the head coach at Sam Houston State, and a good offensive mind, but it just didn't work. We talked about it where I was like, what are we doing? Like, why are you trying to reinvent the wheel at Wisconsin? Like, and you won playing a similar style. Like, it's just like what you were doing at Cincinnati was like some ground and pound, big quarterback. Like, you were a tough team with your identity at Cincinnati. Like, why did you think you had to do this? Like, I just don't understand why you thought you had to add their air raid there. Like, I don't understand it. Like, you dug yourself this hole and lost a lot of goodwill these first 2 years because you're playing 500 football and it all looks weird. And it just, I don't know, man. Like, it's just been such a weird start to Luke Fickell because he was like, Ohio State fans wanted him to be the guy. Like, Luke Fickell was the one where it was like, when we like post Urban, it was like, oh, we want Luke Fickell. Or if it doesn't work out with Ryan Day, like, we want Luke Fickell. Luke Fickell was in the mix for the Notre Dame, like, big time. Like, Luke Fickell was the guy. And now it's like,
I will always like have the belief that if the college football didn't have the calendar it did, Luke Fickell would have been named the Notre Dame coach in 2022. Like, maybe they wanted to keep the the continuity, and with Marcus Freeman, obviously he's been good for them, but I mean, taking Cincinnati to the college football playoff and everything, and then a job like Notre Dame opening up, he's a Midwestern guy. Notre Dame got their previous coach from Cincinnati. I don't know. I feel like there was a lot of, it felt like it fit the vibes, but yeah, now, and you remember the Cincinnati team that went to the playoff. I mean, they had like the 3rd or 4th most guys drafted that year. They had like 9 guys drafted or something that year. So you would think just doing what you did at Cincinnati and probably consistently getting a little bit better talent at Wisconsin should have been enough. So I'm with you. I think that kind of, I don't know, it hurts his credibility a little bit that it's like, you got to go down playing your style. So is that what you wanted to do? You wanted to be an air raid guy all of a sudden? So Yeah, I think it's reasonable to question Fickle to this point. We both kind of have Drinkwitz in a similar spot, and we have Bielema in the same spot. I had to run the numbers a couple times, look at your list, because I was shocked Matt Campbell was not in your top 25 last year. So he was one I figured he was probably top 10 on your list a couple years ago, but he's gone down. His stock's gone down on Chase Thomas's list, and now back up to 18.
Well, he just went 11-3. To be fair, like he had a great year, and that was his first double-digit win season he's ever had as a head coach, first ever. He's 64-51 all time at Iowa State. 7-6 that previous year, 4-8, 7-6, 9-3, 7-6, 8-5, 8-5, 3-9. So I thought he was becoming a little overrated going into last year because it was like, all right, I mean, Iowa State, no history of winning. We went through, I think, at the time of like Iowa State, it's just been rough for them in the football side of things. And he's raised the bar. He's a consistent, solid coach. Like, he is a good coach. The reason he's in the mix, or his name pops up in Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan, that kind of thing of like, what would he be at a bigger job? Like, Chris Kleiman's now in that mold at Kansas State where he's doing a really good job there. He did a really good job at the smaller level, but it's like, what would he do with resources that could win a national title? Like that, we just don't know it, guys. I think that's what makes guys like Campbell, Kleeman, like there's just guys that you're like, well, they're really good here. And I mean, some guys do. Like Urban Meyer won at Bowling Green and Urban Meyer won at Florida. He won at Utah. Like Urban Meyer won wherever. There are some coaches that can do that. There are some that cannot. We've seen that do not just bounce from smaller job to big job with expectations and just they win at the same rate. Like it doesn't work like that for whatever reason. Like Scott Frost obviously won at UCF, and he was the guy where it's like Florida fans wanted Scott Frost, and it was a fight over Scott Frost, and then he gets to Nebraska, and it just does not go well at all. Like there's just so many instances of that where it's like the guy who we thought when they moved up to a bigger job, like obviously it's going to be a home run, and then it just isn't sometimes. And I think that's what makes those kind of guys really difficult for me to evaluate, because I think Campbell has done a solid job at Iowa State, but going into this previous year, I think he was becoming overrated, where I'm like,
yeah,
I mean, all right, can we at least get like a 9-3 10? Like the Big 12's open this past year, where like Texas and Oklahoma are gone. So let's see what he can do now with the two biggest brands in the conference gone. And he made the most of it. Like they did not get to where they ultimately wanted to be, but Rocco Beck's been really fun for them, and I think they should be good again this year and be right in the mix for the CFP. But I don't know. I think Matt Campbell belongs in the top 25 again, getting 11 wins at a really, really tough place to play in Ames. But I think I'll still stand by going into this previous year that he was becoming overrated and was not my top 25.
No, that's fair. And then keeping our list going. Interestingly enough, there's two guys on our entire list that moved 0 spots on both of our lists, and we actually the same two guys moved. The opinion of these guys changed none from 2023 to 2024. One of those is your number 11, Dabo Swinney. He was 11 on your list a year ago. I had him at 7. And ACC title win. What was it? 10-4 season by the end of it. That kept both of our opinion of Dabo Swinney exactly where it was. But 11 through 15, you have Dabo Swinney, Kenny Dillingham, Rhett Lashley, Mario Cristobal, Deion Sanders. Like I said, Swinney was in that same spot last year. The other 4 were not ranked on your list a year ago. My 11 through 15 is Lane Kiffin, Josh Heupel, Kurt Signetti, Chris Kleiman, and Matt Campbell. And Signetti was the only one from my list that was not ranked. So you had Signetti at 20. I had him at 13. You think it's just not enough from Signetti to put him further higher than 20?
I need another year. It's year one. He had a good year, nice schedule. He's won at both places at James Madison, bigger job. Like talk about jobs. Indiana is a terrible job, and it has been traditionally like I think it's the worst Big Ten football program historically. So, obviously a basketball
worse than Northwestern,
huh?
Worse than Northwestern?
I think so.
Yeah, it's down there.
And Northwestern's had a quiet amount of success here in the 21st century. Like Northwestern, it's done pretty okay. But I will say, you need another year. I just can't, like, Cignetti can't be in the top 50. If he gets back to the CFP and he's able to just reload with another transfer, Mendoza from Cal, and he's just able to keep this thing humming, then yeah, he's in there. He lost his OC.
He may be a top 5 coach if he's getting Indiana to back-to-back playoffs.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he has room to operate here, but I can't go higher than like 20 to this point because I need to see another year.
Especially a year where the schedule was so weak.
Yeah. I mean, Dion, for me, I was surprised he's not on your list because Dion, I think last year, because I was one of those people who was kind of like raising an eyebrow where it's like Sean Lewis, who was a great offensive mind, had the #1 offense at Kent State a couple of years ago when he was the head coach, and then he leaves that job to be the OC at Colorado, and they go in a completely different direction in the middle of the year to Pat Shurmur, and it was to mix results down the stretch. People have been kind of like, okay, how's this going to go recruiting wise? What's it going to look like? This, that, and the other. And then they just proceed to be in the CFP mix all year long. Shedeur had a great year. Travis Hunter wins the Heisman. They were great. Like, they were a team that were borderline double-digit win season. He stuck around. He adds Juju Lewis here. Brings in Caden Salter from Liberty. I mean, you bet, like, Byron Leftwich now has a spot on the staff, and Byron Leftwich was the OC for Tom Brady when they won the Super Bowl a couple years ago with the Bucs. Like, you look at the staff, like, he hires extremely well. They're just a solid, good program now. Like, he has revitalized Colorado, and he stuck around, and it looks sustainable. Like, I don't think it's enough to win a national title or anything, but I think it's sustainably good right now. I think he has built a solid foundation in Boulder. And like I said, he hires well, good schedule, and has maximized his stars. And I think it's fair to assume that whether it's Juju or Caden Salter this year, that this thing keeps humming pretty well. So I don't know. I think Dion has definitely gotten to the point where I'm like, there's a lot of proof of concept. He won at Jackson State. He moved up to Colorado. He won there now. I don't know. I think Dion's for real, man.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you're putting this list together. Like, I don't know that there's 25 coaches. I would like if Georgia had an opening tomorrow, I don't know that there's 25 coaches I would want before Deion Sanders. But in terms of like putting him, like saying he's one of the 25 best coaches in the whole sport, like I don't think there's a coach whose 2025 season matters more for the overall reputation than Deion Sanders. Because, like you said, Travis Hunter, generational talent. Like this dude, like I remember Rusty Mansell talking about, like, if there was a 6-star recruit, like this guy would be a 6-star. Like, Travis Hunter is the best player that Deion is ever going to get. Also, Shedeur Sanders might be the best quarterback that he ever has. So yeah, he was able to win with that kind of talent coming to Colorado and like 9-4 season. What were they, 4-8 the year before? Like, obviously Jackson State, he had a lot of success as well, but I think if they just fall off a cliff after, Shedeur and Travis Hunter leave, that wouldn't surprise me at all. If this team goes 6-6 or something, I definitely can't call him a top 25 coach. But I mean, yeah, if they go 9-4, 10-3 or something, they're in the Big 12 championship or something in 2025, then yeah, I think you can definitely make a case. Not only if he's a top 25 coach, he might get into like my top 15 or something like that. Because I just really don't know what to make of Deion post Shedeur and Travis Hunter.
That's fair. I mean, they open with Tech at home, which will be really interesting. That's a great opening week game. That's August 29th.
A little battle of the 1990 split national title.
Yeah, that's good. I'm excited for that one. I mean, you get BYU at home, who was really good last year. You get Iowa State at home. You get Arizona State at home. This is a nice schedule. Like a lot of the good teams from last year in the Big 12. I don't know. I think Deion, like 8-4. I just don't think people remember. Colorado was horrific. He walked into a horrific situation there, and they're now stable. And like you said, like the 4-8 was rough that first year, but I don't know, man. He's built a solid foundation, and my gut is if he sticks around for a little bit, like Colorado is going to be like those 4-8s. I don't think pop up. I think he's going to be somewhere in that 6-6, 7-5 to 10-2 range every year, somewhere in that group, depending on where they are in the portal cycle and guys moving on, this, that, and the other. But if Juju hits, like if he lives up to the 5-star billing and Juju is a legitimate player, I mean, they got a 5-star left tackle in Jordan Seaton. They won that recruitment. And then we'll see on Juju, but I don't know, man. I think they're interesting. And I think, like you said, it's a big year for him. it's also a big year for Dabo, because Dabo can easily get back in the top 10 this year, because the ACC, like, he brings back Cade Klubnik for his final year. They're still in the blue chip ratio for this year. I think they'll be out of the blue chip ratio next year, if I'm not mistaken. They have some talented receivers in Wesco and company. The defense is going to be good. They hire Tom Allen away from Penn State to coach the defense. Garrett Riley and that offense really started to click down the stretch. They gave Texas some problems late. I mean, this is a huge year. Like, if Dabo can get to the Final Four this year, get a first-round bye again for Clemson, win the ACC, I think it's more open at the top. Feels more open going into a college football playoff season than it's been in a long time. I don't know if you agree, but to me, it feels like you can make a lot of cases around the sport, the top tier in the blue chip ratio, to be like, yeah, I don't have to squint that hard to see that team winning it all. And I think Clemson's in that mix. Like, Clemson, this is it. Like, Josh Bates talked about it on his show, and I agree with it, is that this feels like a huge final stand for Dabo and company. And I think he's back in the top 10 mix if they make a deep run, or they go 10-2, 11-1, and they're back in the playoff on the ACC and stuff. So this is a big year for him.
But I mean, what if they do the same thing they did last year, and then
it's still just kind of out? Then I'm like, I don't know, man.
Dabo's not getting fired, though.
Not fired. I'm just saying not a top 10. Like, where I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know if you're doing enough to still be in the top 10. Is, I guess, my point.
Yeah, and that might be fair. I still have him at 7, only because we have 3 coaches that have won national championships right now that are active. Like, Dabo can't be much.
Well, hold on. Let me do this exercise for you then. Would you rather, in the year of 2025, would you rather have Kirby or Dabo start your program from scratch?
Kirby.
Ryan Day. Marcus Freeman.
Yes.
Kalen DeBoer.
Probably.
Dan Lanning.
I see where you're going with this, and it's tough. That's what I was saying with Dion too. Like, there probably aren't 25 coaches that I would rank ahead of Dion, but I still can't put him ahead of a bunch of guys who have proven track records. Like Dabo Swinney, yeah, he's not competing for national titles consistently, but I can't rank more than a handful.
The
of coaches
portal stuff has to matter. Like,
he's changed his stance on the portal
a little bit. They only added, hold on, what did they add this year? They added the Purdue edge. What, they get 3 guys out of the portal? What was it? Oh my goodness, what was their total? It was not many.
But they got some. That's all. They were getting 0 before, so it's baby steps.
If that's the bar.
But they did still win the ACC. Like, I think Clemson should be one of the favorites in the ACC again this year. Like, I don't hate on having him at 11. I think there's so many guys, or there's so few guys, I should say, that have won a national title. I feel like that still matters for something. Like, this isn't Mac Brown's national title. Like, he's still at the program that he won it like a handful of years ago. The biggest one I probably disagree with you on is Mario Cristobal at 14. I have Cristobal at 24, and he barely cracked my top 25, honestly. I think he's kind of got a track record now of just kind of underachieving. Like, I think there's no business for that Miami team to not be in the college football playoff a year ago. And you go back to the year with Justin Herbert, I think, was that 2019? Where they lose to Arizona State one of the final weeks of the season and end up costing themselves a college football playoff bid that year. Like, I don't know. I feel like Mario Cristobal can recruit, and not that I'm just taking away from his recruiting ability, but he was recruiting at Oregon and now Miami's been one of the, loudest programs out there about openly paying guys, and Oregon, we know about the Nike stuff and just everything they've done to, just create, this state-of-the-art facilities and everything that goes with being associated with Nike's brand and all that. Like, those are the 2 places that he's recruited at, and he's recruited well, but he never had success before these 2 stops. And I might be, kind of doing what Lane Kiffin gets a lot and, kind of moving the goalpost on him. But I think that the programs he's at, expect conference titles, national titles, and he still seems to just kind of be coming up short. So Cristobal, I can't have him as a top 15 guy because there's no business for Miami not making the college football playoff a year ago.
To be fair, they still went 10-2, and the people the loss at the end of the year to Syracuse, was brutal, but also Syracuse won double-digit games. Like Fran Brown was cooking with gas.
But
with
they
Kyle
wouldn't have won
McCord.
double-digit games if they didn't beat Miami.
I'm just saying it wasn't an upset. Like the way it was characterized.
It was a huge upset.
Syracuse
over
was really
Miami
good.
upset.
I mean, they were at home. It was a home game. Syracuse, I mean, it was a good game, and it was, I mean, I wouldn't say upset. I think it was really good teams, really good offenses.
I'd argue it was one of the biggest upsets of the whole season. Like, that upended Miami's whole season. What were they ranked, like, 5th? Top? Let me see. Or go ahead.
Well, I don't disagree that what the result was just completely torpedoed Miami's season. Like, that's all fair. What I am saying is Syracuse is a good team, and it wasn't like they lost to Wake Forest in their final game of the year to miss the college football playoff. They lost to a really good team.
They were number 8, and Syracuse was unranked, by the way.
I get that, but they were also, 9-2 going into that game?
Yeah,
or were they 8-3 going into that game, and then got to 9-3, and then won the bowl game? I don't remember which way it went.
So they finished 10-3, so that was the season finale. Yeah, so they would have been 8-3 going into that one.
Yeah, so I mean, it was just, and they go 9-3, they win the bowl game, and like whatever. But what I'm saying is, Miami goes out. Like Cristobal has gotten better each of his 3 years at Miami. So he went 5-7, 7-6, 10-3. At Oregon, he went 9-4, 12-2. COVID year, you throw out, and then 10-3. I'm just saying, like, I don't feel great about Cristobal. Like in the top 10, I don't know if I'll ever be in a point where he's that, but I think he hires well. He addressed it. We're like, okay, the defense cost us this past year. I'm going to go out and get Minnesota's defensive coordinator. I think that could pay huge dividends. All right, Cam Ward worked. We're not playing this game where I'm betting on Tyler Van Dyke and just this in-house guy. We're not doing that. We're going to go out and pay top dollar for a big-time quarterback. Carson Beck could be the number 1 pick in the draft, just like Cam Ward in back-to-back years. If he revitalizes him, like Shannon Dawson is one of the best offensive coordinators in the sport. Their offense was elite this past year. Cam Ward had a great year. Damian Martinez is back. Like they should be like you said, the top. Like it's Clemson and Miami at the top of this conference. And I could see a scenario where they're just as good offensively, but also better defensively than what they were a year ago and go 11-1 or 10-2 and make the CFP this time. And who knows what happens, because I think it's really open this year. So I don't know. I think Cristobal, like I understand there's been the brain farts like against Tech, but I think he's a good program builder. I think he hires well. And
I didn't even mention the Georgia Tech loss from 2023.
That was brutal. But like I said, they were still good last year. Like they still had a really good year, and the defense just was not good enough, and he made the adjustment and changed defensive coordinator. So, and he went out and got Carson back. So I don't know. I'm still bullish on the Cristobal era in Miami.
Yeah, I think he's trending in the right direction for me, for sure. I guess he's up 1 spot from a year ago.
Can you imagine explaining to like college football fans like 2 years ago that we would rank 1 Cristobal, 2 Norvell, or 2 Napier, 3 Norvell in March 2025? Like that'd be the pecking
I might
order.
not be prepared to put Napier ahead of Norvell though.
Really?
I mean, he's had success at Memphis and at Florida State. That 2-10 is an albatross, but like Napier has had his.
I mean, Napier won better. Like Napier had more success at Louisiana than Norvell had at Memphis.
Yeah, that could be true. But yeah, I guess it's a conversation now, which is insane to think about. And then also you have Rhett Lashley and Dillingham on your list. They're not ranked on mine. Dillingham, I can understand that. Still young, unproven to me. But Lashley, I'm definitely more like wait and see on Lashley, because that's kind of, I guess with Cignetti, you kind of have the James Madison success to go with this year 1 at Indiana. With Rhett Lashley, it's really just this year at SMU. And I mean, people were circling that SMU schedule in spring last year, being like, check out SMU's schedule. They might able to make some noise. And I think that's exactly what happened. I don't know that they were actually a good team in 2024, or if they just had a really, beneficial schedule.
He's 16-0 in conference play the last 2 years. Like he didn't lose a game in the AAC their final year there, and he went 8-0 this year in conference play. I just think there's now a track record where he's one of the best offensive minds in the sport, and they ran into just a brutal brick wall against Penn State on the road. But it was also Kevin Jennings had just a game from hell where he completely imploded in that game. But I think he's got it's kind of similar to Miami, where he's got a solid financial backing now with the Ponies, and good recruiting base, great offensive mind. It seems like it fits that. Like, you want good offensive minds and with the kind of talent that you have in the state of Texas. I don't know. I think is he young Gus? Like, it just feels like, I mean, he's a Gus disciple from years ago. I just feel like there's some Gus bust potential with him, where I just think he is. I mean,
what does that mean? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, Gus Malzahn was the OC when he won a national title. He gets back to a national title and has been one of the best coaches.
I'm never giving him credit for that national title.
Why?
It's Cam Newton, man. He's the greatest player. I don't care what offense you're running. It's Cam Newton.
If Scott Loeffler is the OC for Auburn the year that Cam Newton wins the Heisman, they win a national title. They don't win a national title. I'm just telling you, it doesn't happen.
James Coley's winning a national title with Cam Newton.
I don't think so, Matt Green. It's one of the annoying things when people talk about Ryan Day and this Ohio State national championship, where it's like, oh, the team that spent the most money won a national title. I'm like, folks, they were an expensive team 2 years ago when Kyle McCord and that offense was horrific. Like, they were not winning a national title 2 years ago. Like, Chip Kelly got added. Like, they went and made adjustments. Like, it was not just they spent a lot of money. There are teams that spend a lot of money in the sport and do not win. And there are teams in Major League Baseball that spend a lot of money and do not win. It doesn't matter. Like, Ohio State had the right ingredient. Like, you need money to win, but that's not all you need. And Ohio State, like, that's just one of the more annoying things to me. I'm getting on my soapbox here when they're like, oh, the team that spends if you spend the most, then you're going to the national. I'm like, they spent a heck of a lot of money 2 years ago too, and they weren't even sniffing a national title. So, there's a whole lot more to it than that. I kind of lost my train of thought here.
I mean, they were sniffing a national title.
No, they were not winning anything.
They had 2 losses, right?
That offense was horrible. You weren't winning a national title with that offense.
I'm just saying, Ohio State's never been bad. The bad years for Ryan Day are like, finishing number 7 or number 8 or something.
Well, it's a long way of me saying I could just see, like, if it doesn't go well for Hugh Freeze on the Plains this year, you just add in Rhett Lashley to Auburn next year.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I got to see more than a year versus a weak ACC schedule. Like, the ACC schedule, ACC was weak in general, and they had one of the weaker schedules in that conference. Are you ready to go to the top 10?
That's fair. This is going to be some disagreements here. This is going to be interesting as we wrap up with our top 10. Because you have some absolutely outlandish ones here, Matt Gray.
I have some outlandish ones here?
You have some outlandish. Kyle Whittingham still being in your top 10 is absolutely egregious.
You don't even have Whittingham ranked here, right? He is down. Oh, no. He's down just 1 spot. Wait, where did I have him? Down 2 spots from last year. Yeah, Whittingham, his track record at Utah, I'm still holding on to that. I'm not a big overreaction guy. I try not to overreact too much year to year. But yeah, I have Whittingham at 10, Freeman at 9, Franklin at 8, Dabo 27, Brian Kelly at 6. Let's just go all the way down. I got DeBoer at 5, Sarkisian 4, Lanning at 3, Ryan Day 2, Kirby Smart at 1, and then you, sir, have Josh Heupel at 10. Oh, I had Heupel at 12. Josh Heupel at 10, Brian Kelly 9, Lane Kiffin 8, James Franklin 7, Sarkisian 6, Lanning 5, DeBoer 4, Marcus Freeman 3, Ryan Day 2, and Kirby Smart 1. So where's your biggest beef here with the top 10?
Well, I mean, Whittingham's 13 and 12 his last 2 years, so it's not going well, and it feels like Utah, and just, I don't know, it feels like it's not going to end well for the Kyle Whittingham era at Utah. But I think Heupel has won enough to this point where it's like, I mean, he's got to be in your top 10. He's lost 1 home game here in the last 3 years. He went to the CFP. He was a game away from making the CFP in 2022. He would have made the CFP in the 14-team playoff in 22. Like, that's something you also forget. If the 14-team playoff existed in 22, Tennessee is a playoff team. And he has 2 CFP trips in 4 years at Tennessee. So I think he's comfortably in that top 10 at this point. I would say right now you can't put DeBoer behind Lanning. DeBoer went 2-0 against him at Washington, and he's playing now in a tougher league than what Dan Lanning is playing. Dan Lanning, his first CFP game, he loses here to Ohio State, gets blasted by Ohio State in the Rose Bowl this past year. I don't know. I think Lanning's in that top 5. Obviously, I have him there, but I have DeBoer still. I think DeBoer is just in a brutal job. And Lanning, it's funny enough, like Lanning stays at Oregon and DeBoer walks into the Hornets' nest in Tuscaloosa. But I think there's still a lot of reason for optimism. Bama's still recruiting at a high level. We'll see what Ty Simpson looks like, but the offensive line should be really good again. There's a lot. Brian Grubb, his OC, is back from UW. I don't know how you can put Lanning ahead of DeBoer at this point. I also am kind of surprised you don't have Freeman higher.
Other than the Ohio State loss, like that's the one blemish on their entire season. Like this team went 13-0 and won the Big Ten. Like obviously Washington had a great year the year before and got to the national championship, but I mean, I think if it's the same, wow, Oregon almost just, oh no, they're down 4. Disregard. If it's the same format as the year before, I mean, Dan Lanning probably does the same thing Kalen DeBoer did and goes to the national championship at the very least. But you know, the format, it was unlucky, unfortunately, for Dan Lanning to get Ohio State where they got him in the round of 8. I just think Dan Lanning, maybe this is probably me going more towards, it's like a combination, my top 25 of like what guys have proven. And then like, I guess the kind of tiebreaker is who I would rather have. And I think I would rather have Dan Lanning over Kalen DeBoer right now, just with just how he's building the program. And like the sky's the limit for Oregon right now.
That's fair. I'm not going to like go back and forth. For me, I would still lean DeBoer to this point. I think Lanning, we'll see at Oregon if he's able to. But it wouldn't surprise me if DeBoer gets a title before Lanning. Like if he gets this thing right this year or next year, like they can win a national title.
No, that's fair. And it's Alabama. And we both had Brian Kelly, number 2 in 2024. I dropped him to number 6. You dropped him to number 9.
He might be out of our top 10 after this season.
Yeah, this is a huge year for Brian Kelly. I think just about as big a year as anybody, because he could go back up, you know, and solidify himself as a top 5 guy, or like you're saying, he could drop out of the top 10 altogether.
Can I put a final bow on where, like, because Kirby is 1. We don't have to really articulate why Kirby is still number 1 in the sport. Can I tell you the one that we talked about him, that I didn't like putting him at 2 because I don't believe it, but he just won a national title, so I have to put Ryan Day at 2.
You don't believe it? Who are you taking over Ryan Day, other than Kirby Smart?
I would take Kalen DeBoer, Dan Lanning.
So why didn't you put him ahead?
Because he just won a national title, man. Like, he hired well. He hired Chip Kelly. He recognized the problem. He manages a super stressful job, high payroll. Like, there's a lot of pros. Like, I'm not saying Ryan Day is not a top 10 coach. I just don't like this offseason, I think, was disastrous for Ohio State. Is like, now you got Brian Hartline calling plays. We'll see how that goes. I have my doubts about that going well. He's your best recruiter because what Ohio State's brought in there at the receiver side of things has been unbelievable over the years.
Yeah.
But if Brian Hartline bombs as the play caller, he's out. And then you lose your lead recruiter, and then that changes so much about the program. Like, it just changes.
Yeah, there's no going back to being the receiver coach.
Correct. So now you're in the end game here with Brian Hartline, who's just been a game changer for you out wide with these receivers, these NFL first rounders that they've just been producing year after year. I also look at Matt Patricia. Like, at DC, you went out and got Jim Knowles, who was coming off a big-time year at Oklahoma State. Matt Patricia hasn't been coaching. He has not been coaching at the college ranks. Like, it's one thing to take a gamble on an internal hire promotion like Brian Hartline, where he's earned the chance with Chip Kelly going on. Like, look, it is what it is. You're probably going to lose him to a head coaching job if you didn't give him this kind of opportunity. I don't know. But
or an NFL.
Right. Like, it is what it is. But to do it on the other side of the ball too is such a heat check. This is such a heat check offseason for Ryan Day and company, where I'm like, I don't think these go well. My gut is like, maybe one of them does, but like Matt Patricia is DC. Like, you couldn't get somebody better than Matt Patricia. You're Ohio State. Like, Jim Knowles did a great job and shored up a big problem the last couple of years with the Buckeyes. And it did not end well for Matt Patricia at the NFL level. And I don't know, man. Like, I think if you're an Ohio State fan, you hope it's Al Golden, that kind of situation for Notre Dame, where it just kind of he didn't work as a head coach, but he really worked as a DC, and that wasn't a sexy hire at the time. If you remember, like, Al Golden was not somebody that they were celebrating. They're like, oh, Al Golden. But I don't know. Like, I think it's just been a really weird offseason for Ryan Day, where I'm like, you're firmly in that top 2 now with Kirby Smart, and then you proceed to make these hires, and I don't know. I'm pretty dubious about them.
I feel proud of myself with that Ryan Day one, because I had him at 3 a year ago. Because I feel like Ryan Day was one of the best coaches in college football. Only moved him one spot up to 2. Ryan Day went up 10 spots in your list from 12 last year to 2. So that national championship.
I mean, he deserves a lot of credit. They got
you.
embarrassed by Michigan and then proceeded to, like, now more than ever, I just look at these coaches as CEOs, where, like, he rallied
They got
troops.
Embarrassed by Michigan again in 2024.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying.
Blown out, but it was an embarrassing loss.
Well, that's what I meant. 24. Excuse me, I didn't mean 23. And
okay.
He proceeds to run the gauntlet and just blow out Tennessee, blow out Oregon, and we don't have to revisit like everything he did, but like it was impressive. Like Ryan Day rallied the troops. That is part of like what makes a coach elite, is he was able to flip the script when everyone left him for dead, and they went out and won a national title. So Ryan Day absolutely proved the haters wrong, Matt Green, and deserves all the credit in the world. But I just look at it as a CEO thing where I'm like, oh, why are you okay? Interesting. Like, you just came off a national championship winning season with the Chip Kelly, Jim Knowles formula, and we're going Heartline and Matt Patricia to follow it. Okay.
Yeah. We'll see. But then the biggest one we disagree on in the top 10, going from unranked in both of our lists in 2024 to number 9 on my list to number 3 on your list is Marcus Freeman. Not gonna rain on Marcus Freeman's parade, but I've said before, I feel like Notre Dame got really lucky with how the playoff schedule shook out, basically. Like getting Indiana in the first game at home, that's a team you were clearly better than. Getting Georgia without Carson Beck, who was the main reason why Georgia won the SEC in 2025 with all their struggles, or in 2024 with all their struggles on offense. And then a Penn State team that we still don't know how good they are to go to the national championship. A Penn State team that did not beat one top 10 team the entire season. And that's the team you have to beat to go to the college football, to go to the national championship. I just don't think, especially with the format changes that are probably going to happen to the playoff, I don't think there's ever going to be a better an easier run for Notre Dame to the playoff, as well as the regular season schedule. Like, people love to hate on Notre Dame's schedule every year, but it's low key a really tough schedule, like year in and year out. And I feel like 2024 was one of their weaker schedules. What was the best win? USC or something? I don't even know who the best win on their schedule was a year ago. Who'd they lose to early on? Who was the Northern Illinois? Northern Illinois, yeah. So you lost to Northern Illinois, and then they didn't really have any marquee wins a year
USC
ago.
was a banger, if you remember. They blew out Army. Because they blew out everybody down the stretch.
Yeah,
52-3.
That was the one ranked win they had, right?
Yeah. I guess Louisville wasn't ranked. They won at A&M, and that was a big win at the time to open the year.
At A&M, that's probably their best win of the season, yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. Part of it was just they were drubbing everybody for a while, and you just kind of took it for granted. I just think he's 24-5. What is he the last 2 years? He is 24-5. Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, they almost won a national title not being able to throw a forward pass. Like, I just think he did a really good job. And that defense was physical. He beat Georgia. He beat Kirby Smart. I don't know, man. I think Marcus Freeman is what a lot of folks think Dan Lanning is to this point. Can I say that? I think they're like Marcus Freeman with less talent than what Dan Lanning has at Oregon is doing more with less. I'm not saying they're not in the blue chip ratio and that there's a huge talent gap, but Marcus Freeman just went on a great run. He didn't get embarrassed by Ohio State, and Oregon got pantsed by Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. Notre Dame played them strong in the national championship game. I don't know, man. He's a great leader of men. Like, clearly these guys rally, like, they're physical, they're strong. I don't know, man. I think he's an elite defensive mind, and we'll see what Chris Ash looks like coming in to replace Al Golden. But I don't know, man. He goes in, he hires away Brian Kelly's offensive coordinator this past cycle to bring him back to South Bend. He hires well. I don't know. He's a great CEO type of coach. Marcus Freeman, I think, I don't know. You gave me a look, but I would take Marcus Freeman over Dan Lanning right now.
See, that's interesting. I think if Oregon is the 7th seed in the playoff last year, I think Oregon goes to the national championship.
Do you think Oregon beats Notre Dame?
Absolutely. I think Oregon was clearly a better team than Notre Dame last year.
I don't think so.
I don't know. I think obviously, I think they got Ohio State, and the Ohio State game was closer that Notre Dame played than the one Oregon played, but they were getting kind of blown out by Ohio State. But then it was going to become a blowout. It just never really did. Notre Dame was able to to keep it close. So but that game was never really truly in doubt. I don't know. It's just the 1 year. I don't know. I can't overreact too much. I think Marcus Freeman is a good young coach in the sport. But Steve Sarkisian, who I haven't even mentioned, you have where at 6, I had at 4. I think there's just a lot of more proven guys that I would put ahead of Marcus Freeman.
Well, we'll see. We'll see who ultimately wins here. That's all I've got, Matt Green. Anything else you want to say before we wrap up here on this edition of the program?
That's all I got, sir. I'm curious to see where our list looks in 2026. Who are the biggest movers and shakers on this list, and from 2025 to 2026? It'll be interesting to see.
I would say Sark. I'll say Sark, Franklin, Kelly, and Dabo and maybe Cristobal have the most room to move up for me.
Cristobal's definitely got a lot of room to move up. I think maybe Heupel, if they take a big step this year, I think that could go a long way. And then maybe if Kurt Signetti, if he follows up a playoff appearance with another one, that would be massive at Indiana. But Sark just doesn't have that much room, doesn't have that high to go. I mean, I don't think I would just if Texas wins a national championship, I'm not going to say he's a better coach than Kirby Smart. Maybe there's a conversation to be had with Ryan Day, but I don't think he's getting higher than 2 or 3. And I currently have him at 4, so he can't move up too much for me.
Matt Green, always a pleasure, and I'll talk to you again next week.
Yes, sir.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.